Hey there, so I don't typically post videos that aren't overwhelmingly positive or negative. I'm not like a review channel, I review things, but it usually comes from a place of pure hatred or love as opposed to a level-headed assessment of the pros and cons, you know? But a couple of days ago I binged Netflix's new series, The Society, and I just can't stop thinking about it. Not about how much I hated it or how genius it was, but about all the small things I liked and disliked, what I thought it would be versus what it was, what it could become if it gets renewed, what it all means, where it went wrong. It's one of those shows that's hard to watch without knowing someone else who does to bounce ideas and opinions off of, but no matter how hard I try to convince the people I know to watch it, they won't budge, so instead of spontaneously combusting due to an overabundance of thoughts, I've decided to utilize my platform to its full potential and bore you with them. This video is going to be more entertaining for those who've watched the show, but quick summary for those who don't intend to and still want to hear me talk about it for some reason. The Society is about this town called West Ham, where everyone's a lawyer and everyone's rich, in which there's recently been this putrid smell. There's probably a profound reason it had to be a smell and not like an ominous light in the sky or something, but it is kind of strange to have a major plot point only conveyed by characters covering their noses in disgust. Anyway, all the teens are sent on this field trip and fall asleep on the bus when they're woken up to news that they've been brought back home on account of road work or something. When the buses leave, they soon discover all of their families have disappeared, and the next day they realize the town's exits have been closed off by forests. Strangely enough, though, the mystery of what's happened, where they are, how they got there, etc. takes a backseat to the political drama side of things. Who's in charge? Is there government? Are there rules? Yada yada yada. Lord of the Flies in the suburbs. At least that's what people are calling it, because dystopian teen things can't exist without being compared to Lord of the Flies. Maze Runner? Lord of the Flies. 100? Lord of the Flies. Hunger Games? Lord of the Flies. The Society? Lost. Kidding. Lord of the Flies. Although, people are also comparing it to Lost. The rest of this video will be absolutely infested with spoilers, so if it sounds like something you'd like, get out of here and come back when you've finished it. If you just want to know whether or not I recommend it, I would say yes. I certainly like it a lot more than I dislike it, and despite my criticisms, it's at least entertaining, binge-worthy, and thought-provoking. So here's what we're gonna do. I have things I love, I have things I hate, I have pros, I have cons. I'm going to tell you what I liked, then what I disliked, because my mom taught me when you're critiquing someone, you should always start with the compliments. Although I'm bound to spend more time on the insults because I feel more obligated to justify them. I think an obvious plus side to this series is the concept. Although the teens on their own thing has been done before, I think there's something new and interesting about the characters being left in their own hometown. In media similar to it, kids are usually in the woods or something, but in the Society, they're like mid-apocalypse and still in the kitchen making PB&Js. Even their phones still work to contact each other. There's something eerie about how similar it is to our world, which I think was the point. It enables the show to be more about politics than survival, which makes it unique. By this, I don't mean to say that I agree with the points they make about sexism and gun control, although I can't say I don't agree. I'm not 100% sure if they were trying to make points or just to display problems. I don't know. What I mean to say, though, is that I love that the show is basically a think piece on forms of government. I don't know about you, but the different forms of leadership, monarchy, anarchy, dictatorship, democracy, capitalism, socialism are like the only school subjects that never bored me. It's all very fascinating, and the other books, shows, and movies in the Lord of the Flies Offspring catalog usually have themes dealing with this stuff, but they're mostly busy with like living in the woods. So it's nice that most of this show is unconcerned with that, and it's more about the stuff I'm into. I also really loved the whole trial sequence. All of that called into question our own judicial system, but it was also really emotional because they're just kids. I really loved that part. Because of this show's desire to mirror and comment on our society, it really makes you think, which was obviously what it was going for. Mission accomplished, I think. I've been absolutely dying to talk about it, and now I am. When a show demands conversation, I think that's always a plus. But it's not just in societal commentary that it does this, there's also the mystery, moral dilemmas, and references to other media that give things a whole new meaning. I don't mean to oversell it, but a lot of the details are so intentional that it reminds me of a Jordan Peele horror movie. You know how after Us came out, there were never-ending interpretations? On a smaller scale, that's what this show has done. The interesting thing about the mystery is that a lot of the theories surrounding it come with complex implications of their own. I don't really want to get into all of those, but wow, they've completely ruined my life. There's also a lot of thought to be had over references to the Bible, to Peter Pan, to that coin toss play. Also, Grizz is like constantly quoting authors and stuff. I love when stories reference other stories. It's like story inception, and it's a really clever way to let the audience know what you're getting at without having a character say, "This is the deeper meaning, folks." I don't have much to elaborate on here, but the show's fast nature really makes it hard to stop watching. I'm sort of about to argue this is a bad thing too, but I just wanted to include it here because it's true. I sat down one night intending to check it out and maybe just continue eventually. Then I accidentally stayed up all night watching it because there was just no stopping. Now the negative stuff you all came here for. Keep in mind, all of these critiques come from a place of love for the show. I'm frustrated that it's not as good as it could be, but I don't think these things make it worthless. I'm absolutely excited for season 2 if that happens, and I think this might be one of those shows that finds its footing as it goes. I think pacing is actually an editing term, but I'm using it to describe the literal speed of the story here. My biggest problem with The Society is that the story it's telling would be much better suited to a slow-moving format. It's tackling so many characters, so many plots, but most of all, so many big ideas. Philosophical questions, moral dilemmas, political commentary, but also political theory. It's doing so much all the time that you don't actually internalize much at all. Some of the most important concepts don't feel fleshed out in the slightest. One episode we're tackling women in government, and the next gun control. One moment we're executing someone, and not too long after everyone's being poisoned. In some ways this must have been a stylistic choice. Maybe they wanted it to feel hectic, and I bet some people prefer the show to keep them on their toes. It's definitely easier on the attention span the way it is now. Personally though, I think this show's at its best exploring themes and commenting on our society. Those aspects of it would have been greatly improved with a little bit of breathing room and time to let things sink in. Every other critique I'm about to bring up in this video is ultimately a result of the fact that I think the narrative is rushed. Here's the best way I can think to explain it. It feels like the writers had this giant list of things they wanted to happen in season 1. Then either by Netflix request or as a creative choice, they only had 10 episodes to do it, and it ended up being more important to them to get it all in there than to make sure every arc flowed naturally and was handled with care. As a result, they wound up introducing everything they wanted to, but not completely following through on just about any of it. Some conflicts and ideas are just completely dropped, and others don't marinate long enough to mean anything. Cassandra has a pacemaker in this parallel universe with no doctors and a limited supply of medicine. Then she's murdered by gunshot before that becomes a real threat. It's implied Campbell's a jerk because he's felt neglected compared to his brother his whole life. Kind of cliche for the able sibling to feel a sense of jealousy, and probably problematic in some way. But it was still nice to believe that the villain would have depth until he was revealed to be a clinical psychopath that everyone's afraid of. Lexi holed herself up in her mom's hoarder house, but we never talk about that again. The couple I can't be bothered to remember the names of pretended to stay together for a private room, but are magically broken up not too long after. The thing that really sent me over the edge and made me think about all this stuff was when Allie disowned Will as a friend, but then it's 6 months later and as if they never fought in the first place. At that time, Allie was also super unhappy being in charge, but is suddenly cool with it upon the time jump because I guess we don't need to see the most important character arc of the season. The time jump is actually the catalyst of a lot of drop in momentum and a good example of how this show was racing with itself. I honestly believe the only reason they did it was to ensure Becca would give birth and Allie would lose power by the end of the season. As a result, they had to cancel all of the existing narrative threads they'd set up and make way for Poison Pie and election season. It feels like things are happening because they come next in the script and not because of the natural progression of the story. I can't help but imagine what the show would have been with a snail-like pacing of something like The Haunting of Hill House or even the early seasons of Game of Thrones. I want every detail to mean something later. I want to be afraid that if I stop paying attention, I will not understand the rest of the story. Whereas while I was watching The Society, I would latch on to interesting details only for them to be immediately discarded. They kept telling me things were important and then punishing me for caring about them. This might sound crazy, but bear with me. What if the first season ended with Cassandra's death? I know, that doesn't even make sense. So much more happens. She dies in episode episode 3. I also have no idea where the story is going in future seasons. Maybe things that happen later will make me feel differently about this, but just bask in the theoretical with me for a moment. Think of all the things that happen in just the first 3 episodes that expanded upon could make things feel more real and earned. What if we spent more time with the characters' families in the beginning so that we actually feel it when they're gone? What if it took Cassandra more than a 10-minute montage to convince the town to form government? What if the quartet of unrequited love stories were given enough screen time to flow naturally? What if we knew that girl that died long enough that I could remember her name right now? Imagine if they were able to show instead of tell us that Allie feels like she's in her sister's shadow. What if we saw Cassandra run out of medicine? What if Cassandra was built up as our protagonist for 10 episodes before expectations were subverted in a Ned Stark kind of way and she died in the end? That still might sound too agonizingly slow, so here's another idea. What if the first season ended with the execution of Dewey? That actually makes sense, right? They skip forward 6 months right after it anyway. Now, there would be some downsides to doing it my way. For instance, if they weren't able to hop from conflict to conflict the way they do as it is, I doubt it would have the same can't stop watching bingeability it has going for it. It might make the show seem more boring in general. I just can't shake the feeling that so much was lost in the pace. I'm the last person in the world who you'd think would say this, but the society puts way too much emphasis on potential and canon romantic pairing. I probably wouldn't mind this if any but 2 of them were good, but because most of the ships are boring, underdeveloped, and forced, I can't help but notice how much this game of who likes who bogs down the actual story. Grizz and Sam are the exception. I love them. They changed my life. The other maybe exception for me would be Helena and Luke, ignoring the fact that he joins the dark side in the end. What I'm mainly referring to when I reference an overabundance of romance are the completely forced love Olympics between Harry, Kelly, Allie, and Will. So the show wastes no time in letting us know Allie has a crush on Will, but Will has a crush on Kelly, and Kelly is dating Harry. Then, in the span of 10 episodes, Kelly breaks up with Harry, Allie hooks up with Harry, Kelly hooks up with Will, but tells him she thinks he's in love with Allie, and he's like, oh yeah, you're probably right, but Allie's like, no, we can't date because I'm a leader, and then almost immediately changes her mind, allowing them to hook up as well. Now that might all be well and good in a regular teen drama in which there's not much else to do but talk about who's dating who, but this is all going down during the apocalypse. The show simply doesn't have enough time to make us care. It all goes back to the pacing issue. It seems to me like the writing staff was like, okay guys, by the end of the season we want all of these people to have hooked up with each other. And nobody questioned whether you could really build up that many emotionally fulfilling relationships in that short amount of time. They backed themselves into a corner in which they were forced to base all of these pairings on pre-established feelings. I think that's the real downfall. We're told point blank who likes who with no real exploration as to why. Allie likes Will, Will likes Kelly, but I can't bring myself to get invested in a relationship that's cornerstone as a past I never got to see or experience. I think that's why I kind of do like Allie and Harry the best out of these 4. At least neither of them liked each other before the series timeline. Don't get me wrong, my favorite ship of all time is Stydia, so I'm not always opposed to the unrequited love thing. There's just a difference between seeing 2 characters fall in love and being told that they are. I honestly think they forced this love square for the ability to stir the ship war pot on Stan Twitter. They're advertising with ships already, which I think is unfortunate. Keep in mind, this is me talking here. I got my start on YouTube through being a Bughead stan, which is embarrassing, but like, that's what happened. I think it's absolutely possible for a show that's about more than romance to use romance as a tool to explore character and create drama. The problem in the society, I think, is that rather than ships being an avenue for character and theme, ships are being thrown in the ring to see what audiences will latch onto. They're an advertising technique more than anything else. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike most of the characters. I actually like a lot of them. My favorites are Grizz, Sam, Kelly, and Becca. I just think they were done a disservice at the hands of the pacing issue. How many different ways can Julia say the show is rushed? Challenge. But seriously, they're juggling so many characters that they would have done themselves a favor in taking more time to introduce them to us. But instead, they're so focused on getting them to the alternate dimension that we're just given first impressions before everything unfolds. I don't actually think any of them wind up being more complex than they seem at first glance. Sure, Kelly has a little redemption arc, but can you really tell me you didn't know she would the second she spoke. Remember, she's one of my favorites, and I find her self-trained nurse thing really interesting, but I think her redemption could have been handled so much better if it were a season-long thing. She sort of just decides to, like, be a good person, and that's that. Everyone else, how did they change from the moment you first meet them, really? We are told point blank the only character trait Allie has is being Cassandra's sister, and that remains the whole crux of her character throughout the season. We're told Will is a foster kid who has a crush on Kelly and who is being crushed on by Allie. What more is there? Despite neither of them being my favorites, I think Harry and Elle are the only characters given enough time to seem like real humans as opposed to vehicles of plot. They also don't have enough time to subtly display character struggles, characters' inner motivations, and instead they just have to outright say their innermost thoughts in an inhuman, like, blunt way.
I live in your shadow for 17 fucking years. And now you want to disappear.
People just don't talk like that. I guess my problem with the characters, generally speaking, is just that I found myself not buying it. I don't buy into these people. Anyway, I guess that's all I have to say. I'm sorry for making this video nobody asked for. I'll be back soon to do the same.